Today we're doing 5.4b, page 279 on worksheet 4. Remember that real part goes first, imaginary part goes second. This is a recap of what we did with 5.4a. So, on this problem, we're multiplying. So we are distributing the I through here. So when we go, I times 9 makes 9i, and I times negative I makes what? Negative I squared. Okay, but we should know, and you need to remember, that I squared equals what? Negative 1. So when we write this in, we have 9i minus a negative 1. And two negatives side by side like that make a positive. Very good. Okay, so we end up with 9i plus 1, but we need to rewrite this so the real part is first. So how would I write it? That is correct. Okay, what do you think we're going to need to do on example 4? Very good. You need to use FOIL or the box method. It's up to you. Do you guys want to go ahead and try that on your own?
Yeah.
Perfect. When you get the answer, you can show me on your whiteboard. Perfect. Yes, you would always combine like terms if you can. Perfect. Good. Okay. So the correct answer is 16 plus 2i, if you got that. If you didn't get that, we're going to go ahead and work through it. I'm going to go ahead and do the box method. So I'm making a 2 by 2 box because my parentheses, there's 2 terms and 2 terms. So then I write 3 in I and 5 in negative I. And I'm going to multiply. So here, 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times negative I is negative 3i. I times 5 is, and then I times negative I is negative I squared. But remember that I squared is what? Negative 1. But this is a negative 1, which will make it a positive 1. So I'm going to cross this out, and this is a positive 1 in here. I'm just going to circle that so I know what number that is. So if you notice on this, you have like terms going in both diagonals. So 15 and 1 we can add together, which is how much? 16. And then 5i and negative 3i makes positive 2i. And that's how we get the answer. So when you're doing a box, you're going to end up with like terms in both diagonals. You should never have an I squared in your answer. We know that I squared always equals negative 1. Okay, do we have questions on example 4? Okay, on example 5, what is wrong with this?
The I is at the denominator.
The I in the denominator. Because an I in the denominator, this really represents a square root, right? Because I is the square root of negative 1. So we can't have an I in the denominator. But remember that whenever you have a plus or a minus here, you end up having to multiply by, it starts with the C, the conjugate. So what would be the conjugate of 1 plus I? 1 minus I is correct. Wait a second. There we go. And whatever you do to the bottom, you also need to do to the top. So, to be careful, I might go ahead and make a box on this to make sure I multiply it correctly. Okay? So I'm going to make a box. So we have a 1 and a positive I and a 1 and a negative I. Okay, when I multiply here, 1 times 1 makes 1. 1 times I is? Good. Negative I times 1 is? And then we have a negative I times I, negative I squared, which will be a negative 1, which makes a positive 1. So I'm just going to circle this positive 1 and cross this other stuff out. So remember, I have like terms in both of our diagonals. So these ones, what happened? The i's cancel out, which is the whole purpose. We don't want i's in the denominator. So you shouldn't have i's left over. And we just have 1 plus 1, which makes 2. And then what will I do with the top? Very good. So 5 times 1 is 5. And 5 times negative I is just negative 5i. There's only 1. And then can I reduce anything there? Is my real part first? So that's my answer.
I'm so confused.
Okay, so ask me a question. So let me just kind of recap, okay? Just like we can't have roots in the denominator, we can't have an I in the denominator. Anytime that you have a plus or a minus in the denominator, the only way to get rid of this I is by multiplying by the conjugate. The conjugate is written exactly the same as the first one, except for if this is plus, this is minus. If this was minus, this would be plus. Whatever I do to the bottom, I also have to do to the top. To be safe, I would make a box and multiply this out. So that's what I did. I had a 1 and a plus I and a 1 and a minus I. When I multiplied that, I got everything in here. Remember that a negative I squared ends up becoming a positive 1 because it's negative 1. Does that make sense? So then I just have 1 plus 1, which made that 2 because those canceled out. And the whole purpose was to get rid of i's in the denominator. So those need to cancel out. If they didn't cancel out, you probably multiplied wrong. Are we good now? And then with the top, all you're doing is multiplying it through to this. We didn't have to use a box on this because this is just a 5. So I can distribute the 5. And this, if this had been 5 plus I, then I'd have to do the box again. Okay? We're good? Okay. So on number 6 now, what am I going to do? The box again. But I'm going to multiply by what? The conjugate. And what will be the conjugate on this? Very good. 3 plus 2i is correct. Am I going to need to do a box on the bottom? Yes. Well, I need to do a box on the top. Yes. Good. Because it's 2 terms with a plus there. So I'm going to let you guys try this on your own. If you want to do the bottom first and have me check the bottoms right, or you can do whatever you want.
Oh, maybe that one I just didn't know what this was. So that could have been my part. So remember, this is going to be a negative 4i squared. Remember? Which I'm not making a positive 1. Perfect. Good. Really? No. Put that like this.
The bottom part is correct. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start on this. So on the bottom, I'm going to do the box first. Because remember that we should cancel out our i's, right? So I have a 3 and a negative 2i and 3 and a positive 2i. When I multiply there, 3 times 3 makes 9. 3 times 2i is 6i. Negative 2i times 3 is negative 6i. And then a negative 2 times a positive 2 is a negative 4. And then I have I squared. But what does I squared represent? So this means I really have negative 4 times negative 1, which makes a positive 4. So I'm going to circle this positive 4 and cross this out. What happens with the 6i and the negative 6i? Cancel out. So I have a 9 and a 4, which makes what in my denominator? We add them. 13. Okay, so my denominator is done. If you have an I in your denominator, you did something wrong. We don't want an I in our denominator. Now I'm going to do the box with our numerator, the top. So again, I have a 2 by 2 box. I have 5 and 2i and 3 and 2i. When I multiply, 5 times 3 makes 15. 5 times 2i? 2i times 3? 6i. And 2i times 2i is 4i squared. But we know the I squared is actually a negative 1. And what is 4 times negative 1? So I'm going to circle that, negative 4, and I'm going to cross this box out because it's really negative 4. When you're dealing with these i's, remember that these diagonals will match and these diagonals will match. If they don't, you've done something wrong. Okay? So I have 15 and negative 4, which makes 11. And then 10i and 6i makes 16i. And there's your answer. So, again, your like terms, are you going to have, where are the like terms going to be? In your diagonals. These terms will match and these terms will match. Even on this one, these one matched, but they canceled out. So your i's, and then you should have regular numbers. So these should always be able to be added together, and these should be able to be added together. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here.